I'm 99.999% positive I know why you keep getting injured as a runner. And this is something I've experienced myself, and that's why I feel I can talk about it. There's definitely the one-offs or anomalies and people with weak bones or tendons and things like that. But I believe I know what causes the majority of injuries. It is either a lack of strength or a lack of mobility and flexibility. And I believe we could boil down most injuries into this. If you break a bone, you break a bone. If you have a fracture, I totally get it. When it comes to things like runner's knees or shin splints, which I've had both of and been able to fix without taking time off of running myself, I've realized that, a lot of our injuries boil down to this. I had shin splints, and the way I was able to fix this is I started running in barefoot shoes and I stopped heel striking as a runner. For those of you who aren't familiar, heel striking is like when your heel is what's landing, so here's the foot, and as you're running forward, you're just landing your heel into the ground. It's not very efficient, and when you think about it, you're kind of like stopping yourself and running into it, and so it's sending the shockwave of impact up your leg. So I had a terrible form when I started to get into running, and I had shin splints. And so what I started doing was running more on the midfoot or front foot strike, which is a little more natural, and kind of using momentum in your favor opposed to pushing into it. And I started walking around in barefoot shoes. So these are the things that I did to fix my shin splints, and I realized what was going on is I didn't have a strong enough foundation, and my form was a little bit off. So obviously that can have an impact as well. But more so than even fixing my form, it was the fact that I was developing my feet muscles. Unfortunately, we grow up in these super cushioned and compact shoes because they look cool. When you're 3 years old, your parents put on these little cute booties and sneakers that you look adorable in, and yet cramps your foot. And my perspective is because you have all that support in that shoe, your muscles start to atrophy. It's similar to like if you were to have a cast for 12 weeks because you're not using those muscles. It's a use it or lose it thing. They die off, they atrophy. And so I believe it's the same thing with our feet, is when you have shoes with a lot of support and too much. I'm not against support, but when you have too much or an unnecessary amount of support, your feet muscles are gonna atrophy. And if you have a terrible foundation, everything on top of that is risked falling apart, compensating, and getting injured. So those barefoot shoes absolutely changed my life. And to be clear, I didn't run in them. I ran in supported shoes, but I walked around every day in barefoot shoes, and that seemed to make all the difference with shin splints. Haven't had them again to this day, and I've ran 10 marathons in 10 days or had a 200-mile week, 212 miles. And so I believe I've been able to avoid that because of the strength. The opposite happened with my runner's knee injury, and that was I had a pain which felt like it was kind of on the back of my kneecap. And what I did was a little bit of strength exercises. So I would take a 2.5-pound dumbbell, loop it around my big toe into like tibialis raises. So here's the foot, here's the kettlebell or plate, and you just do curls basically. So you strengthen that shin bone muscle, the tibialis muscle. And so I did that to help with my runner's knee. But what I did that I think had even more of an impact is I stretched the hell out of my quads. I was constantly stretching my quads because I was thinking about it. It made sense to me that no wonder my knee felt like it was hurting. My quad muscle was so tight that it was pulling on my knee and my kneecaps because of the volume I was doing. So a little bit of strength exercises for that tibialis muscle, but really what it was making sure my mobility and flexibility was good with my quad. It only makes sense, right? If you were just like had a muscle that's so tight it's pulling on a joint, of course you're hurt. But I wouldn't necessarily consider that an injury per se. I would consider that more a mobility and flexibility issue, right? And so all these injuries that runners have, I really wonder how much of an impact you could have, or how much you could prevent that, or even just fix it if you stretch and do the right strength work activities. I think one of the biggest issues that runners have is they'll take time off because of an injury, and then when they get back into running, they never fix the root cause, so they get that injury right again. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that someone can have the same injury over and over again over the course of like 2, 3, 4 years, right? Now, there is absolutely such a thing as tearing your ankle or getting a fracture, a hairline fracture, or those things absolutely exist, but the common injuries that runners are having, it doesn't make sense to me that they keep being repeated. I don't think it's because we're weak. I mean, I think humans are meant and born to run. When we were hunters and gatherers, we would just run after our prey for miles and miles and miles and days so that we could bring back food to the tribe. So I believe we are born to run, and unfortunately, in the society we are in, we're not as strong, we're not as mobile, and we wear shoes that atrophy our muscles because our muscles don't have to rely on supporting themselves. So if you have common running injuries and you just haven't been able to get rid of it, or you go into a doctor and they tell you to stop running, I think that's complete bullshit. I don't think we should stop running. Are there some injuries out there that are like legitimate and they're tears and broken bones? Yes, I've already addressed that. I'm talking about these things that people don't have answers for. You may not be strong enough to be able to support the volume, or you may not be flexible enough. So as your muscles get tight, or it pulls and hurts you. So hopefully that gives you some things to think about. Obviously, I can't diagnose what's going on without knowing your injury specifically, but if you have questions about this, or maybe how you can strengthen certain areas or how you can stretch them out, I'm a certified yoga teacher. I understand the body pretty well. So feel free to leave a comment. If you want to hear more running stories, running tips and tricks and mindsets and things to think about, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. If you don't want to subscribe, that's totally fine too. I appreciate your time nonetheless. I know it's valuable. So I hope to see you on the trails sometime soon.